The session is chaired by Professor Srabani Choudhury. She is a professor at the Japanese Studies program at Center for East Asian Studies, CEAS. She has been a recipient of Japan Foundation Fellowship. Her interest lies in Japanese economy and management. She has been in advisory role to many companies that use Japanese management principles. She has written many international papers, journals on transferability of Japanese management styles and issues of languages in international business. She is also a member of Melbourne Research Group. Thank you.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and konnichiwa, ni hao, and onsen hosei to all of you, which basically means good afternoon. This is an East Asia Matters session, and as the yesterday and half of today has unraveled to us, whether international studies or international relationship matters to international theory matters, theory testing or phenomena that have capability to contribute towards a new theory has a lot of relevance in East Asia. Be it security, where you have contestation between the world two powers right now, to a country like North Korea, to that of economic concerns that is driving current new emerging areas of economic security, supply chain management, to the issue of climate change, where certain countries in the position within the East Asia locale have deep concerns. All this is something that makes East Asia matter to the world and to us as a center. So I'm very happy to have with me my elite colleagues of China and Korea who would be putting across their views over why East Asia matters. Raviprasad Narayanan as well as Dr. Sandip Mishra. None of you, I think, out here, most of you do not need an introduction. They teach a variety of courses through the MA and the PhD program. But what I would like to definitely mention about Dr. Raviprasad Narayanan is the fact that he has a book on decision-making and foreign policy, India-China relations. And with Dr. Professor Sandip Mishra, which I would like to let people know, he's a regular contributor to Korean newspapers and runs a parallel opinion in Korean Times. So he's very well read within the Korean diplomacy as well as bureaucrats, and he's a visitor to many institutes where he engages in not only talking about India-Korean relations, but also with respect to Indian political system. So I don't think I could have had a better panel to chair today. And I would request both the panelists and begin with Raviprasad, who is going to be talking to us on China.
Thank you, Srabani. Thank you, everybody here. I have 10 to 12 minutes. What I have to speak on is, does China matter? The title, I feel, has a typo. Because after does China matter, should it be a question mark, exclamation, or full stop? I'll stop there, only with the title. But yes, answer is China matters. Thanks to somebody sitting in the White House these days. In the mid-1990s, the Federal Reserve in the US had a person, Alan Greenspan. He was asked as to why the stock market's going up. His answer was very correct. He said, there is irrational exuberance. After that, this was during the Clinton times. Now, the White House is going through irrational political exuberance. China comes here. Politicians make promises. And here, my argument is different. Even the Communist Party of China, for all of us, should be maybe considered as a political party, which it is. The party has changed. Gone are those old days of revolutionary rhetoric, polemics, I'm not naming individuals, but after that individual's demise, to meet Marx and the whole gang upstairs, the politicians in China have changed. We see a Communist Party of China which lacks ideological strength these days. We see a party which is obsessed with economic management. This we can see at the hierarchy, where Xi Jinping has seen to it that there is a technocracy taking over. The premier is Li Qiang. Li Qiang is a technocrat. Now, here comes politics where the Communist Party of China has many factions. The strongest faction with arms is the PLA. The PLA is the army of the party. The state comes after that. Xi Jinping, being a politician, he is creating his own faction, which is the Zhejiang faction. Zhejiang is a province on the South China Sea. And Xi Jinping used to be the governor for 5 years. Li Qiang is also from Zhejiang. Important positions in the Communist Party of China are headed by people who have something to do with Zhejiang. He is creating his own faction. At the same time, he has seen to it that there are no more princelings. Princelings are called Taizitang. That means children of original founders of the Communist Party of China. And Xi Jinping is the son of Xi Chongshun, who was a very close, in double quotes, comrade of Mao. But Mao felt insecure as Xi Chongshun. He was very popular in the southernmost province, Guangdong. Why? Because he saw that young people were less as they were going in the 1950s to Hong Kong and work, do odd jobs. This was seen by Mao as a challenge to his authority in the party, Communist Party. And it was Xi Chongshun who was asked to just remain in this province, Guangdong. That is the history. In China's case, why does it matter? Whatever China does, the reaction is twofold. First, we are dominated by, you could say, Occidental literature, the Western style of reportage and books, journals, occasional papers, etc., etc. Incidentally, I'm not partial to what Chinese scholars do, but Chinese scholars have a tongue-in-cheek method of observing and critiquing. When it comes to critiquing, they are very, you could say, anti Xi Jinping's policies when it comes to rotating generals in the PLA. Politics is Xi Jinping has to do it because to him, as a politician, he is worried about the PLA. Why? Because he does not have any military experience. He was never with the PLA. When the Cultural Revolution took place in the 1960s, hold your breath, he was working in a pig farm. And he was treated honorably, communist standards at that time, that he was not executed or thrown out of the second floor, like what happened to Deng Xiaoping's son, Deng Pufang. He was thrown out of the second floor, and even he survived. And he heads the Communist Party of China's physically challenged wing, Deng Pufang. So the Communist Party of China should be seen as a political party, which is what I've been trying to argue. it is not an absolute party. It is a party with vested internal interests, and every province has its own groups, factions. What has come now is that members of the Communist Party of China, apart from being party card holders, see them as entrepreneurs. Many party members are business entrepreneurs. When China's economy suffered, even before the pandemic, there were signs that the real estate had reached a state of, you could say, it was stagnant. Who suffered most? It was the Communist Party and the PLA. Because the PLA, they are like real estate owners and rentiers. They suffered. After the pandemic, the party is still to recover from the economic calamities they have been witnessing. So we have a situation where in China, the Communist Party of China, well, the day is not far off when the Communist Party of China, CPC, will be jocularly known as Capitalist Party of China. Because when it comes to ideology, when all of us read, what exactly do they mean by socialism with Chinese characteristics? They will not explain. They won't explain because it is historical continuum of what China and Chinese as a people have been involved in. Business interests. I started with the US. I'll end there. US, for instance, when the railroads were being constructed in the late 1800s, where did the workers come from? From China. Which is why on the west coast you have Chinatowns. One can't expect Donald Trump to acknowledge this. When it comes to tariffs, if China puts a tariff of 15% after the US put 10% or whatever, it is a game taking place so that when they negotiate, it will be discussed. And let's face it, China is at that stage in its economy where it is a very close rival to the US when it comes to the GDP. And here, China has to be seen as a country, not a spoiler, but a manipulator when it comes to international institutions. Hold your breath. China has 4 memberships in the World Trade Organization. First, the People's Republic of China. Second, Hong Kong. Third, Macau. Fourth is the Customs Union of Chinmen, Matsu, and Chinese Taipei, Taiwan. What if these 4 come together? Second, when it comes to the UN, China uses the UN as a very convenient tool. It will prevent India from even aspiring to be in the UNSC. Controversially, let me ask, is it worth it? That's for all of us to think, and you can of course interrogate me, no problems. So China here matters as its importance is the trade aspect. The day is not far off when they will be the world's largest trader on bilateral terms with every country. What is the use of WTO then? Negotiations have to be conducted with China, with Beijing. Second, we read financial newspapers. It has stock market, you could say, valuations of New York, London, Paris, Frankfurt. But you don't find Shanghai. You don't find Shenzhen. And Hong Kong. It comes at the end. We have to be prepared to face information onslaught when it comes to China. That's why I feel China does matter. Lastly, Srabani, I hope 1 minute, okay. Lastly, when it comes to India, we are playing a Dvaita here. Why do I say this? Politically, we are a democracy. But in economic terms, we don't participate in China's grand plans. At the same time, what are we going to do if they become our larger trading partner? That day is not far off. And what about our trade deficit? Are we discussing that? Those are crucial issues when it comes to the boundary dispute. What is the way out? For instance, in our university, do we do research on even hypothetical solutions to the boundary dispute? Hypothetical. I have not come across any. So it becomes very controversial. So I'll leave it at that. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Ravi. I think you've exposed the audience to a large areas of questioning that we expect during the Q&A sessions. And over to Dr. Sandip Kumar Mishra, who is right now a Korean expert from East Asian Studies. He would be discussing the same question of how East Asia matters to the international relations and where it is positioning itself today. Over to you, Sandip.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. The question which had been asked, why East Asia matters, I'm going to answer this question by putting forth two set of arguments. One is basically material terms, why East Asia is important, and second, in ideational term, how and why East Asia is important. In material terms, suppose, take for example, economic domain. I think 1.6 billion people, they stay in East Asia. Overall GDP of $26 trillion. China $19 billion, the biggest one. You must be also aware that China is at present trading partner number one of more than 120 countries out of 193 countries which are right now member of United Nations. And actually in 2010 book, Kent Calder and Minier, two people, they wrote a book called The Making of Northeast Asia. And in that they had a concept of Shanghai Circle, saying that if you take Shanghai and 2 hours air flight from there, you will have South Korea, Seoul, Japan's Tokyo, Taiwan, Taipei, and Hong Kong, Shanghai and Beijing, definitely. So this region, this Shanghai Circle is so important that at that point of time, I am talking about 10 years back, they had almost 1.3 billion people and almost producing 1/5 of global GDP. So that's a very, very important and dynamic region. At that 1/5, basically it has come near to 1/4 almost in last 10 years, 10, 12 years. So I'm saying that this is a very, very dynamic. You can see how for India also, suppose 17% of our total trade, it happens with East Asian countries. I'm talking China, Japan, and South Korea especially. So I think it's a region where, say, second, third, and 12th biggest economy of the world on nominal term, they have been there. So I think in other, you can say, if you look at technologically also, this region is important because if you look at like 65% of lithium, 75% of cobalt, 100% of natural graphite, 90% of rare earths, they are produced by China, though the material comes from other places. AI index also, if you see at the top 2023 ranking from Stanford University, US is at the top, but China is number 2. And if you look at last 10 years papers published on AI, China has produced 5.5 lakhs papers in 10 years, 2013 to 2023, whereas US had just 5.5 lakhs. So I think definitely in economic and technology term, it's a very dynamic, very vibrant region, and you can't ignore. And when I'm talking about East Asia matters, two things I would like to emphasize. One, that I'm not saying that other regions are not important. I'm saying that East Asia is also very important region, which matters. And secondly, I'm saying that it matters for the world, it matters for India also. So these two things we need to keep in mind. The second part basically is about security and strategy. As you know that the two biggest narrative and contest, two basic narratives which are happening in global politics right now. One is rise of assertive China, and second, in the leadership of United States, articulation of what is called Indo-Pacific strategies. I'm talking about plural, because several countries, they are having strategies and they are not identical. They have lots of commonalities, but they do have their own. So I think this contest between rise of China and Indo-Pacific strategy is happening in the region. This is the region which is basically what you call in Orgonesky term actually power transition. That's happening, and that's why the region is important. We also know that there are two very difficult places strategically, one Taiwan, another North Korea. I think in question answer, if it's required, we will further elaborate. And if you look at defense expenditure also, Northeast Asia basically is, after United States, is the second biggest defense expenditure, $411 billion. Even Europe and West Europe and Central Europe combined is less than East Asia. I think its security strategy-wise also very important. Culturally also, I can say East Asia important because, you know, there's a civilizational state that is called China. And then you can also see how new cultural center, power centers have been emerging in case of China, in case of Japan, in case of South Korea. We all have been aware about BTS and soft power of South Korea. So I think it's a very, very important region where, let's say, traditional cultural civilizational elements as well as modern cultural expressions, they have been coming up, they have been interacting with one another. At the same time, they are also interacting with world at large. So I think for that also is very important. You can see how, in case more interested, you go to North Korea, they have their Juche ideology, which has its own, how Confucianism could be connected with the modern socialism and other ideologies. So I think it's a very, very important. So that's material part of my presentation in which I try to, can say, have some glimpses of how this region has been doing quite well, and we need to. On the ideational part, I think what Professor Srabani mentioned about theory testing, I will also say that in the global international relations theorization, there are trends in which it's not only testing ground, basically. Theory making could also be done through the historical experiences of interstate relations in this part of the world. And not only East Asia, for Africa, Latin America, say South Asia. So all the regions, they have their own history. Probably they have their own different kind of, say, distinct kind of interstate relations. So why should international relations theory should be theorized on the basis of Western experiences? Why can't we make it much more rich by including different experiences, including our Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam or all, let's say, Chanakya. So many. So for that region, I would say that in East Asia, three ideas which I'm going to basically, which are considered to be quite common. One is basically hierarchy, that, you know, realism and this is anarchical state, like the nature of international system, the structure of international system is anarchic. That's what we have been taught by Western theorists. But I think, and hierarchy is considered to be empirical reality, but I think it's not considered to be a normative, you can say, because sovereign state system which was established at the Westphalian, after Westphalian experiences, they talk about all sovereign states, they are equal. I think this idea appears to be quite universal, but if you read history, at least 600, 700 years history of East Asia, actually David Kang has done it. Before that, in 60s, John Fairbank, he has done it. So you can see how this East Asia has a very different kind of principles to organize interstate relations. It's not equality, it's hierarchy. And hierarchy is not empirical reality which you can't do away with. Basically, it's also a normative prescription. in East Asian Confucius idea. So I think how this hierarchy rather than equality could be another way to organize that could also be understood if we follow and if we read East Asian history, East Asian interstate relations in a long historical term. I'm not saying that right now they have been following or not, because there are scholars like David Kang who wrote an article in 2003 saying that the title was Getting Asia Wrong. And I think last year also, last year, he wrote another article saying, Still Getting Asia Wrong, No Contained China Coalition Exists in Asia. That's what he read. You can go to the article and see how this argument, and I'm not saying that he is right or wrong. I'm saying that this basically is another way to understand how East Asia has been. So this hierarchy has been a very important idea from East Asia, which must be understood. And similarly, harmony. Harmony is also, because sometimes we talk about peace, stability, but we don't talk about harmony. But I think Kyohan in 1984 book, he mentioned about how agreement, cooperation, they are political, but harmony is a political term. Anyway, we can talk about that. So 1 minute more. And so I think if you look at the 500, 600 years of East Asian history, I think there had been more, less interstate conflict than the European. And it was basically Sino-centric world where hierarchy was there, harmony was emphasized. And in a way, they created an order, the third concept which I would like to say. This order was unlike you can say Western order, where you have formal equality but informal inequality. Actually, East Asia, they had formal inequality but informal equality was there. There was kind of space for all of them. So I think I can talk about more in question answer, but I will stop by saying that, look, I'm not saying that East Asian model or interstate relations, this should be followed by any other region or not. What I'm saying that this idea that Western interstate model is universal, that must be questioned, and we need to inculcate, or rather you can say articulate different perception of interstate relations, because what we say, like say current liberal international order, this is not in a very good shape, and we need to have lots of options to deliberate and think about our future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandip. I think there is lots to be discussed now, and I'm hoping that we will have a very engaging Q&A. I'll just bring in two things that I think is also important why East Asia matters. If you look at the future, then East Asia is facing questions which would become the questions of the world in future. Demographic challenge, the elderly statehood that is fast progressing both in Japan and in Korea. Japan is promotes climate change concerns because it's also an island country. So therefore, there are questions that are, global South questions, which are essentially not supposed to be the OECD countries' area of concerns, is not actually true when it comes to East Asia. So this is yet another area where East Asia leading countries would probably play a role, and definitely Japan as a country which does not have the normal statehood as one would like to say because of the pacifist constitution, often uses these concerns as its concerns to put forward in platforms and gain a space in its leadership. We can always handle questions on everything because Japan has been compromised today because you had two people basically looking at East Asia and, not much has been discussed on Japan. We can always answer questions. So I open the session for Q&A. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My question is really basic and really refers to all the three countries, Japan, of which you are a leading expert, and you. One factor which used to, often people used to highlight, was the importance, and Sandip referred to that, is culture. that culture is at least an intervening variable, especially even in terms of foreign policy behavior. You had, in the case of China, you had spate of books being written by L.S.T. and Johnston and by Perry Anderson, When China Rules the World. Similarly, Japan, post the samurai-led Meiji Restoration, you have had a large volume of literature, anthropological and otherwise, suggesting that culture is a very strong variable, also in terms of foreign policy. So I was, China, Japan, Korea, and in China's case, of course, this is mimicked by, or this is actually also in the Chinese foreign policy articulated as such. Often you talk about Confucianism, which is a kind of benign Confucianism of, in terms of foreign policy, but internally expressed as loyalty to the state and obedience to the family, or obedience to the state and loyalty to the family. Is that, Ravi, is that how it's described? Yes. Yeah. So I was wondering whether culture is an important variable, or is it as, are they going to be just, to paraphrase what Varun says, Warren said in an original article in one of the original books that we wrote, I edited with Kanti, it's just another big country, or just another big, small and medium-sized countries in East Asia. We don't really need to study them to understand their foreign policy behavior. We don't need to study them or study their culture. You don't need to be a Japanese expert to understand Japan's foreign policy. We don't need a Korean expert to understand Korean foreign policy, and we don't need really a Chinese expert. So this is your chance to tell us why CPOD can't study you all without us needing to know what's happening inside all these countries.
Well, it's scary when the dean starts reminding me of something I wrote 24 years ago. I assure you I've also evolved.
34 years ago.
Is it 34? Is it? Oh God, okay. I need to take me to the barn and shoot me. I'm too old. But see, I want to actually take up this idea of hierarchy as an organizing principle, because I think, first of all, it's a pernicious idea and a dangerous one. But secondly, I think it's actually fundamentally ahistorical. The David Kang argument, which has also been utilized by other very distinguished thinkers like Kishore Mehboobi, for example. So Amitav Acharya. I mean, that the idea is around. There's some fairly profound thinkers who sort of articulate it. Now, we can recognize that sovereign territoriality was something that emerged in a particular historical cultural context, the context of Europe. And there were a whole bunch of reasons why the Peace of Westphalia led to that way of organizing power. It could have been other ways, but it was. But we are ignoring completely the fact that Europe expanded outwards and swallowed non-Europe, and did it for a considerable period of time. I mean, it was literally centuries of sort of literally a new way of organizing sort of world of power, organizing power. So, I mean, today to sort of to say that sort of sovereign territoriality is somehow a Western import, and that other regions may have other logics, is actually, to me, a very, very difficult argument, particularly because Asia, I will argue, is still living in the moment of political modernity. And what I mean by political modernity is that in this part of the world, the sovereign territorial state is still trying to perfect its sovereign territoriality. And if you look at all of the big obsessions in our part of the world, it's not just East Asia, but beyond. China's obsession with Taiwan, the normalization of Japan, Kashmir in the Indian context, and one could go on and on and on. I mean, in this part of the world, the sovereign territorial state is still struggling to become a sovereign territorial state. We've had Aadhaar in our country for, all of a decade, basically. and a bit more, right? I mean, so identifying every single resident on your territory is something which we as a state in India have done only relatively recently. So what I'm trying to sort of argue is that, the idea that sort of, yes, there is no coalition in Asia to contain China. That's, I think, correct. To that extent, David Kang is correct. But to sort of assume that all countries are going to behave like, say, for instance, Cambodia did, and bandwagon with the rise of China, is also something that we can contest. If you look in Southeast Asia, you don't see sort of bandwagoning behavior. You look at sort of, what's happening, in the South China Sea. You're not seeing bandwagoning behavior. China is using its entire force to sort of indicate a particular type of territorial preference, and it's being contested by everybody, from the Vietnamese to the Indonesians to the Malaysians to the Filipinos. Everybody's challenging it. So I really want to ask this question: this making East Asia unique in this sense, is it really even helpful to us analytically? Let me stop there.
Open the floor for more questions. Ravi?
Yes. When it comes to China, history does play a very important role. Why? There is a aphorism in Chinese, Chung Shui Wei Ti, Shi Shui Wei Yung, which means Chinese essence for continuity, Western modernity for progress. China wants to attain both. And this is where the Communist Party of China sees Chinese history as something which has been in continuum. And that history cannot be ignored. Second aspect is hierarchy. China has realized that the world can be reconfigured using the same history, where Treaty of Westphalia, unfortunately, is considered as something temporary. Yes, sorry, but they consider it as something which will change, as in history there have been not countries, realms. So in Chinese scholarship these days, they speak of Asia as starting from Turkey, Persia, not Iran, Persia, India, which they call Yin Tu, and then Han China. Hankuo is Korea, while Japan, Rewan. Interestingly, in their map making, I apologize to Mercator, the maps we have, we face the threat of those maps being changed. Why? Because the Chinese cosmological worldview, the northern capital is Beijing, north city. Southern is Nanjing, south capital. Xi'an, western town. And, hold your breath again, eastern capital is Tongqing, Tokyo. Now what is happening? If this was to happen over a period of time, thankfully, we'll be upstairs or downstairs, wherever. So, if that day comes, the world will be completely changed, which is where one notices that the Treaty of Westphalia to them comes from Europe, yes, but it is seen to be something temporary in the Chinese historical calendar, where states, they decided to have a treaty, after which the squabbling which the people were going through stopped. But in Asia, the squabbling is very different, which is why, a slight aside, when it comes to settling our boundary dispute with China, we have to discuss it inside our country as to what about the people who are living on the frontiers. Without them, can we here in Delhi decide how to draw a Mercator map? So that way. Next issue is a reference to Asia. Asia sees itself as not the Western style of modernity, but various versions of political modernities. So, for instance, let us look at South Asia. Sri Lanka has its problems internal, but as students of political science, international relations, that country has remained a constitutional republic. So have we. Not the case with other countries in South Asia. In China, sadly, the Communist Party is enforcing its constitutionalism. But the entire script of the Constitution 1982 was written by the party. So it is a party state. Here the version I have is China should be seen as beyond the party state. And I think, jocularly, I think it's going to become an app state. Because everything requires apps in China. And sadly, China, the biggest problem is not external. They are very scared internally of their reducing population numbers. They are. Young people don't want to settle and have families. So they have domestic problems of a different order altogether. I'll leave it here, otherwise I'll keep going. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I think both the important interventions. I think Professor Mattu asked about culture, role of culture in foreign policy making. I think, role of culture had been there, even I think both of you, I remember when I was student, so Mattu sir and Sani sir, they because Tanham at that time, he wrote an article saying that India doesn't have strategic culture. So both of them, and Professor Kanti Bajpayee also. So
that's the article.
Yeah.
It's 1991.
Yeah. So saying that, yes, strategic. So all of you, please do read that book, Tanham, because now all the articles are together, 3-4 articles. So basically, except Tanham, others are arguing that, look, we are having strategic culture, roughly. So I think culture is important. But basically, when I'm saying culture is important, I'm also basically trying to underline that, it doesn't mean that the culture has remained static. I'm not talking about 600, 800 years back culture. So they have been interacting with modern institutions, which have evolved or rather started in United States or rather, Western countries, and it has come to different parts of the world. So I'm saying that those cultural roots are there, but at the same time, they have been also further moderated by modern institutions, modern, you can say, rules, modern, you can say, interstate behavior. So similarly, I will say that East Asia also, I think they have been, you can say, jumbling. They have been, it's not that China is behaving in a particular cultural way alone. I'm saying that their cultural part is also there in their foreign policy. At the same time, there are other modern, you can say, aspirations and modern adaptation. They have been also there. And to Professor Sani, I would like to say that when we studied Chosun dynasty in South Korea, that was 1392 to 1910. We were very much surprised that Korea was supposedly a client state of China. China was patron, Korea was client, and they used to call it suzerainty relationship. And this suzerainty relationship you can't capture, if you go into details, you can't capture by Western interstate Westphalian model, saying that sovereign territorial states, how they have been. Because in Western frame, actually, South Korea was a subservient state, in the sense it was not an independent country. But history says, and the behavior says, that it was very different. So I think we have become so used to of this Westphalian order in different parts of the world that the David Kang, actually what he said that East Asian history before the West, like before the modern West came to them. So I'm saying that it's really difficult to imagine, but I think it's true that they had different formula, different, you can say, assumptions on which they had their interstate relations. I'll give you one thing and then I'll stop. That when 1876 Japan forced Korea to open, that was a treaty called Kangwa Treaty happened. And the first article of the treaty was that Korea is basically is going to keep itself away from China. So basically the China-Korea relations, there is so much you can say intertwined with each other that it's difficult to say that. And there was a time when actually China was dominated by nomadic people from outside. There was a time in Choudhury dynasty when Choudhury dynasty kings, they used to feel that they are the torch bearer of this civilizational, like Sinocentric civilizational entity. So I think I'm saying that not now, but in past, East Asian order had a different mechanism of interstate relations. And I'm not saying that we have to follow it. I'm not saying that it's going to reappear in East Asia, as probably David Kang has been arguing. But I'm saying that why not be aware about that rather than rejecting it, that it could not happen. And yes, I think sovereign territorial state in East Asia, they are in making because they have adopted a new institutional practice and they have been moving in that direction. So I think, yes, they are in still, and that's why sovereignty is emphasized. That's why lots of interstate conflicts are there and competitions are there. I'll stop myself.
Okay, my 2 pence on this issue of culture and foreign policy with respect to Japan. Every one of us know that Japan wanted to follow the West. Yet, if you look at the Meiji Constitution followed by their militarist approach, one realizes that they still wanted to have certain amount of culture embedded into their constitution as well as their foreign policy making. The co-prosperity of the Asian connotation that was given essentially is a very hierarchical one where Japan wanted to be on the top and the rest. If you see the post Second World War, and if you're going to see the economic development program, they again came up with the flying geese theory where Japan would hierarchically be on top, followed by the others. So, does Japan believe in culturally looking at hierarchy as a way of progressively pushing their agenda? There are instances when it has been. But maybe in the last 12 years or 10 years, if you're going to what has become the current model, Japan has realized that hierarchy won't work. And that's why the Indo-Pacific story. That is why the multilateralism has become such a big issue within the Japanese foreign policy making. And why is Japan doing this is, of course, essentially because the world has changed. Assertiveness of China has happened. The Indo-Pacific region is no longer Japan's region. It is used to be at one point of time, but today it is a region where multi-players have a stake and they have reasons to have a stake out there. They are needed by Japan as much as they need Japan. So the shift has also happened that way. I think we'll stop here and ask for more questions. Students, please ask questions. We are engaging in something, we can take it to the faculty lounge and do it. So please ask questions. Yeah. Please introduce yourself. The mic, please, to the student.
Also, there are accusations that China does significant.
Thanks. In China, historically and even now, if there is a social hierarchy, people who are at the uppermost levels are called Lao Shi, teachers. And every government, even the Qing dynasty, they used to allocate budget separately for education. When it comes to robotics and other modern, ultra-modern aspects, I have a very controversial answer, which is a question. Why is it that our great IITs, starting from the one next door, they have electrical, chemical, mechanical, and computer engineering. But they don't have robotics, aerospace, aeronautical. Aeronautical engineering is there in Kanpur. For a conference, I'm sorry, a digression, I had been, and very interesting, the airfield there had cows grazing. So, if we don't focus on these high-end aspects of engineering, we will always end up buying technology and products from other countries. So education and East Asia, within East Asia, I can say about China, education is central.
Even for Japan, South Korea.
Yes. But in our country, it's a very different way we look at it. Thanks.
What about North Korea on this question?
North Korea also, I think, if we talk about education, actually I had a chance to visit North Korea for 10 days in 2013, and I visited their library in Kim Il-sung University and Pyongyang University of Foreign Study and others. I realized that if you look at their library, the books related to science, mathematics, natural sciences actually overall, they are abundant actually. All possible books are there. There may be limitations, but overall, when it comes to social science and humanities, except Kim Il-sung life and all those hagiography things are there. So they also emphasize on education, especially science. And if you look at every year, this math Olympiad and science Olympiad, every 2-3 years, 4 years, one North Korean student would also be there. So it's a very amazing that a poor country, like limited resources, and very limited they are spending out of that money into education, but at least in science part, they have been doing quite well.
May I add? Just 1 minute. Yeah. Sandip, let me add. When it comes to education, a communist country like China, if one was to go to libraries, especially in the city of Shanghai, you find books very critical of China. And even the students, those who are visiting the library, you can see them sitting on the floor and reading. They are not banned. Also, when it comes to society, the Communist Party of China has banned religion. But most Sundays in urban areas, people go to church, various churches, which are inside flats, where it's interesting, the priest will be a Methodist for a month. After that, he follows some other aspect. So that's how it is. So religion is something which officially is banned, but practiced privately. And don't ask me who's the priest, a party member.
More questions. Yeah, quickly, let's put up your hands quickly. Let the mics reach you people, whoever it reaches first. Yeah, just quickly pass the mic around and get the questions there. We have very little time left.
Ma'am, my name is Fazle Ahmed, a student of first year PISM. My question is that there are two sets of powerful and influential nations in East Asia. One is China and other two are South Korea and Japan. From India's perspective, New Delhi should create a strong relations with South Korea and Japan, which most of the time aligned with US. And is there a chance to build a strong relations with China apart from economic relations? Economic relations are there, but whether India build a relations with South Korea and Japan, and is there a chance with engage with China? Whatever the India's stance, it will surely impact the contemporary US hegemony at global level. So my question is that. Okay. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Manoj, a final semester student of Master's PSM program. I have a two-part question for Dr. Raviprasad. So first, you talked about China's revolutionary demise. I just wanted to ask if revolutionary demise, then with what is the CCP trying to curry favor vis-a-vis the third world? And second part is that when it comes to China, why we as Indian scholars rely on Western perspectives rather than framing our own perspectives? Do you see any hindrances over there? Thank you.
Hello ma'am, I am Noel from second year IR. So my question is relating to fertility rates in South Korea. So, government has come with lots of policies, but nothing has been working out. And other question is, when we talk about fertility rates, especially South Korea, we come across the question of migration. So, one thing we know, everyone knows, is that it is very homogeneous society. So, but it seems to be like one of the prominent solutions. Can we see a Korean unification for the solution of fertility rates? Can we see that thing? And my other question is, I read this thing in some paper about the interaction of traditionalism and modernity. When it happens, it leads to less fertility. It happened in East Asia, it happened in South European countries also. Can you share your thoughts on this?
I'll answer the Taiwan question. When the UN Charter was signed, it was the then Republic of China of the KMT which was the first signee. The great United States was the fifth. Second, in 1971, when Taiwan was kicked out of the UN and the PRC was a member, till then, at the UNSC, it was the Republic of China. So, in Taiwan, the discussion is, can the US be trusted? Second, and thanks to Trump, it's become more complicated. Second is demise of the Communist Party of China in ideology terms. The journals reveal that there are no more political polemics. It's all got to do with the economy. The weekend torture you can have is read the speeches of Xi Jinping in People's Daily. He speaks like a low-level manager of a state-owned enterprise, only speaking of the economy, not ideology, political ideology. I'll stop here. Send me email with your questions.
Yeah, I think about Fajr's questions, China on one hand and South Korea, Japan. I think India has very close relationship with both Japan and South Korea, and we are strategic partners. And if you look at the economic exchanges, technological exchanges, other you can say common understanding about Indo-Pacific strategy. So we have been quite, you can say. At the same time, we are also connected with China. And as you know, our foreign policy has been, especially in last 10 years, 10, 11 years, it has been talking about two very specific terms and again, strategic autonomy and multi-alignment. So we are going to chart out our foreign policy course by our own and depending on our own national interests. We have been doing it. And the last one, that fertility rate issue, I think you are quite right. What happened that in traditional society, women stay in home, but then when you start modernizing, women start doing, like going outside for work and at the same time doing work at home also. So in this period, there are double burden. Probably one could be like one of the reasons why low fertility rate. But when male members, they start taking, like helping them in household works also, maybe in the next more modernized South Korea, especially culturally, socially, I think this process could be slightly addressed. That's my submission. Thank you.
As is the practice in East Asia, thank you to the Dean and thank you to the Preeti and her team of people. All of them are my colleagues out here who've been putting up a whole, I don't know how many months of work to get us to this table. Thank you all of you, and thank you for giving us this opportunity. Thank you. Sheshesh.